let's talk about football for just a minute.
Okay.
Let's just address it. The season's not over. Would be dumb to ask you definite questions, but for people who are concerned about the football program and where they are at 3-6, your chance to address them, what would you tell them right now from your view?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at our program, I'll make a comparison to when we didn't have a great feeling in our mouth several years ago when we had back-to-back 2-10 seasons, and I'm evaluating our football program. And I didn't think we were competitive in any of those games. I didn't think we played hard. I didn't think we were well prepared in any of those games. And other than the offensive side of the ball for the Mississippi State game, I always say, when I look at our team, I think we are well prepared. I think we have played hard. Our players have not quit. They're still very much bought in. We've had some tough breaks. You go through those 6-game losing streaks. We had the ball with the lead or a chance to take the lead in every one of those games in the fourth quarter, including at LSU and at Alabama. BYU, of course, at home. The Texas A&M game, I don't make excuses for anybody, but when Luke Haas gets hurt on the first drive, that dynamically changes what our offense can do. And we didn't adjust quick enough on that. And so I have all the faith in Sam Pittman as our head football coach. We had to make a decision with 4 games left to try to reinfuse some energy, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And at least 1 game in, it appears that that was the right decision.
When you say we, I mean, to what level, what extent were you involved in the conversations to make that coordinator change?
Sam and I visited for about an hour after that game. We talked again on Sunday morning. Sam and I are on the same page with that. He doesn't have the ability to terminate a contract that has a multi-million-dollar buyout in it. That's a decision he and I are going to make together.
When you were at the Little Rock Touchdown Club, that's the last time I can remember hearing you talk publicly this year. You said nothing's wrong with the football team. You said you're not making excuses, but you can't coach experience. Those were direct quotes.
Sure.
That was after the BYU game. Has anything changed in terms of how you evaluate the team since those remarks?
I still think we have some inexperience on the offensive line that's gaining more experience and getting a little bit better as each game goes on. But, I'm not making excuses. I still don't think that there's I know we're 3-6 and we've lost some close games. We're also in the SEC. Do we have some challenges, some areas we need to improve? Absolutely. But this is not kind of we're in a make or break, having to win the last 3 games or anything heading down the stretch.
I was a little surprised at Mississippi State because you go into that game, you're 2-5, you haven't won an SEC game, it's an 11 o'clock game, we know how that can affect atmospheres. I thought it was a great crowd for everything that led up to that game. I wonder just what you all are expecting from an atmosphere standpoint over these final 3 games, because you do have FIU coming in, you've got their Black Friday game that always affects attendance, but what have you seen from ticket sales, just what you've heard leading into these final 3 weeks?
For all intents and purposes, we're sold out of tickets for this weekend's game. Now, people with those tickets in hand have to show up. I think this past weekend we'll do a lot to have people show up. The weather's supposed to be great. It's a mid-afternoon start at 3 o'clock, and so I expect that we will have a great atmosphere, and depending on what happens this Saturday, I think that will dictate what happens the following Saturday versus FIU and what happens there. If we're playing for a bowl game against Missouri on that Black Friday, I think we will have a great and very energetic crowd, minus a big deal of our student attendance because of the Thanksgiving break.
Usually by this time of year, we've got the the next year's football schedule. We don't have it yet. Usually comes out in September. I've heard maybe December. Is that when we're expecting?
There's going to be an SEC network show that will introduce the football schedule the week after the SEC championship game.
I know all the wedding planners are interested because they're trying to get their...
I know what it is, by the way, if anybody wants to pay me, and I'll tell you. We'll put some money towards NIL or something like that if you really want to know what the football schedule is if you're planning a wedding date.
The SEC announced something today about baseball permanent opponents. Missouri and Ole Miss are going to be the teams that Arkansas plays every year. From what I've heard, if it's a 9-game schedule for football, Texas, Ole Miss, Missouri would be those 3 teams. How do you go about determining those? And I would assume there's a lot of back and forth, give and take. that goes into those discussions.
There is, and I mean we're still somewhat in the infancy of our membership in the SEC comparative to some of our other member institutions, and so there's some traditional rivalries, and some schools have multiple traditional rivalries that the conference is trying to protect. When you look at a 9-game schedule, those were not protected in the current 8-game scheduling model, and so obviously there's some geography that's attached to that. There's rivalries that are attached to that, and I think when you look at Ole Miss, us being able to declare Ole Miss in Texas and Missouri as our permanent rivals is about as good as that could shake out.
I was listening to Greg Sankey during halftime of the soccer championship last week, and he said that everybody had met recently, I think maybe in October, and maybe we're close to a consensus, as close as you can get to a consensus on 8-9 games. What can you tell us about where you are?
We're not close to a consensus on 8 or 9 games. So, no.
He said close to a decision.
We've got 2 models. We have an 8-game model and a 9-game model, but I think what's worked for the Southeastern Conference, our ultimate goal is to get 1 or 2 teams into the college football playoff. And right now, the 8-game model, I mean, we have gotten 1 or 2 teams in with only 4 opportunities, and with 12 opportunities, we think we can get multiple teams in. So we're not going to make a change just for the sake of changing. There's got to be some type of value add for us and some definitive, hey, we're going to get multiple teams, because if you play an extra game, that's 9 more losses within your conference, and that's going to hurt your chances. And that's why you see conferences that have a 9-game schedule, we're able to get more teams in there because that's 1 less loss. And so the current model has worked for the Southeastern Conference membership, and so there's got to be a definitive value add for us to make a change just for the sake of changing.
I think consensus was my word. I think he said decision. Sorry about that, Greg. As it pertains to the 8 and 9 games, I think I've heard you say that Arkansas is not a team or a program that's built to play 9 SEC games plus a Power 5. Explain to us that discussion, because if you go to 9 games, maybe some of these Power 5 games go away.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest hang-up with a 9-game model is it 9 games with the current Power 5 requirement that we have now, where let's take the 2025 schedule, we'd play 9 Power 5 games plus Notre Dame. That's 10 really intense, tough football games to put our young men through. And I don't know that from a depth standpoint that the University of Arkansas football program is built to endure 9 really tough football games. It's hard enough to endure 8 really tough football games during the course of the season. And I think that's probably so for the majority of SEC schools. I mean, we beat up on each other week in and week out in that schedule. And so it's not to mean that you can't play some non-conference games. They're going to be really, really tough. But there's a definitive drop-off and a reason why everyone schedules an FCS opponent and a group of 5 opponent, because it gives you an opportunity maybe not to get beat up as bad week after week.
Stadium naming rights for football, that's something that's on your radar right now. I think I read, $3.5, $4 million is what you were told over 10 to 15 years would be the market value?
That's the corporate market value. Okay. Like if you went to a corporation, that's what it's been valued at. But we will go to some personal entities, some families within our Arkansas community and approach them in regards to the naming right opportunities sometime in early 2024. Those expire June 30th of 2024. It doesn't mean that we have to just have a no-name stadium on June 30th, 2024 if we don't have a naming rights partner, but we'll begin to really dive into that.
Safe to say that if it's a family that buys the rights, it would be less than the corporate naming rights?
I think it's the opposite of that.
Is it the opposite?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you want to write a check, Kevin Trainer will be in the back. He will gladly accept your paper at the end of this. The naming rights is going, I've heard you say, is going to help fund the Bud Walton Arena renovation. Tell us where we are with that, because I know there's been some decisions made here recently with the trustees.
Sure. So we're very much in the planning stages of a major capital campaign to try to raise somewhere in the neighborhood of about $200 million. That will help fund the renovation to Bud Walton Arena, a new facility, building in the end zone of our soccer stadium, in addition to Bogle Park, a renovation to our tennis center, all will be encompassed into this capital campaign. We are in the design phase. Like we did a feasibility study for Bud Walton Arena back in 2019, put that to rest when COVID hit. We have kind of brought that back to the surface. We have an architect, national architect, AECom. We have general contractors. Mortensen is partnered with Nabholz, and they're really looking into what does that renovation look like? What's the cost of that renovation? I think everybody's aware that costs have changed significantly from 2019 to 2023, significantly. And so we're really having to look at what that renovation looks like and what we can actually afford.
Are we still looking at not the end of this season, but the end of next season potentially as a starting point for that
In an
renovation?
ideal scenario, let me choose my words correctly, we would begin that renovation following the 24-25 basketball season, so roughly in March of 2025.
Okay. You mentioned soccer and softball. I think when I talked to you about when you went to the trustees and said, hey, this is what we're thinking, you were saying maybe the end of the 23 soccer season and the end of the upcoming softball season. Has anything changed to change that time frame?
It has. The cost of those facilities has changed dramatically. To put it in perspective, when we built the track and field outdoor facility, the O'Meara Center, and we built the J.B. Hunt Baseball Development Center, approximately $400 a square foot. Those facilities were completed in 2021, so just 2 years ago, $400. The soccer and softball buildings are being priced at closer to $750 a square foot. So that's what's changed for us. That's why we're going to launch this capital campaign. We don't really have the money to pay that cost out of reserves, and so we need to go out and raise the money for both of those facilities.
Speaking of soccer, you probably saw this quote. Colby Hale said the conference tournament is, quote, stupid after they lost it the other day. And, you know, when I mentioned that interview with Commissioner Sankey on the SEC Network, he actually said that he had a conversation with both of the coaches on the field about what can we do to help you from an NCAA tournament perspective, winning national championships. Do you think that was something that was referenced?
Well, soccer, you play Tuesday. We play Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. That's 3 games in a 5-day span. When you talk about running around the soccer field for 90 minutes, what these young women and young men who play soccer, the amount of running they do, there's not enough recovery time to play 3 games. And so what he's talking about when he thinks it's stupid is that championship game, to play those 3 games. I mean, it was kind of a war of attrition. You could tell Georgia was tired. We were tired. There were no goals scored in that game. There was an on goal that Georgia got that one of our players kicked in, obviously by mistake for them. And so, it's tough to come back and play 3 games. And so, whether the conference tournament, I don't think it's stupid, but the format may need to be rethought so that it's in the best interest of the student athletes.
You think that may happen after expansion?
It may or it may not happen after expansion because you're adding 2 more teams. If you add more teams to the mix, I mean, it's already a 1-week tournament. And so, you as an athletic director, you want all the student athletes from all the schools to have the opportunity to participate in that postseason tournament. So if you cut it down to a 4-team tournament where you only had 2 games and you played a game on a Wednesday on campus sites and then on Sunday, well, there's 10, 11 schools that get no experience of a conference championship. And so that's hard. And so you're trying to have that balance act. Okay, what's in the best interest of the overall well-being, health and well-being of a student athlete, and what's in the best interest of their experience as student athletes.
And these are discussions you're having with all sports because any sport that has a conference tournament, baseball,
absolutely,
you name it.
Sure. And, I mean, you may find it hard to believe, but when you put 16 coaches around a table and ask them to agree on a format, it's hard to get an agreement on a format. So it's hard for me to get agreement on campus. So you bring 16 coaches from around the SEC footprint to try to get consensus on a format. It's very challenging. No offense to the coaches in the room.
You sent an email out yesterday to your supporters about NIL Lobbying Congress. You're part of a coalition of athletic directors who have like-minded thoughts when it comes to NIL. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, so the Coalition for the Future of College Athletics officially launched on November the 1st. There's 28 of the 32 Division I conferences are now members. The SEC government relations staff asked us to send letters to our constituents, to in turn send letters to Washington, D.C., to ask for help from a congressional intervention for NIL, because there's roughly all 50 states have their own NIL laws. The conferences can't manage that. The NCAA can't manage that. We need some federal legislation. What I will say with that, our congressional leadership in Washington, D.C. is very much on the same page with the University of Arkansas and their athletic director. They're very supportive of and willing to help to try to intervene from a federal legislative standpoint. They don't need to be peppered with emails, but being a good conference member, we sent that email out. I may have gotten my hand slapped for that, by the way, but anyway.
When you mentioned the delegation, I don't know if you were just talking about Arkansas's delegation, but you've got a couple of former football players and Representative Westerman, Senator Bozeman.
Yes.
Do you find supportive ears when you have maybe athletes who have been through those experiences?
Absolutely, and if you just have some level-headed ears, which I think we have in our entire delegation in D.C. from the state of Arkansas. I'm specifically talking about the Arkansas delegation. I don't mess with other states' delegative bodies, but they are very level-headed, and we do have some former student athletes that benefited from being student athletes and understand the importance of that overall experience and what NIL has done potentially to that experience, because this is really a football and a men's basketball challenge that's going to negatively impact our other sports if we don't get our control on this.
I made a mistake using consensus earlier. So tell me, in terms of SEC leadership, your colleagues, other ADs, what's the mood as it pertains to NIL? Do they want change? Are there some who are happy with the status quo?
No, I don't know that anybody's status is happy with the status quo. Do I have a couple minutes? Okay, so NIL, there's really two pieces to NIL. NIL, the way it was intended, name, image, and likeness, is as a student athlete, if you have a value to your name, image, and likeness, and a company, product, or service wants to pay you to endorse their product, their business, their service, that's the good part of NIL. So when you see KJ Jefferson or other student athletes that UAMS is promoting their sports medicine care, that's legitimate name, image, and likeness. What we often do in college athletics, and we're our own worst enemy, is we find the loophole to gain a competitive advantage. And now collectives have been born. And collectives are a group of donors that pool their resources, and they induce student athletes to attend and or stay at that respective institution to play their sports. That is the bad part of NIL that we need some congressional help to get our arms around. NIL, the way it was intended, awesome. And our student athletes should have the opportunity to monetize their name, image, and likeness, whether that's through a video game, signing autographs, whatever the case may be. Nothing wrong with that. Student athletes should have that opportunity. But to get paid to transfer from one school to the next or to stay at a school, ridiculous amounts of money is not good for college athletics, and that's where we need some assistance.
I don't know how good of a follow-up this is. How healthy is Arkansas's NIL right now relative to the teams that you're competing against?
I would say we're in the middle of the pack relative to the teams that we compete.
I want to...
Again, Kevin will be in the back taking donations for NIL if you need to. And that's just, so right now, and I'll just put it in these terms, there's 14 SEC schools right now. Our operating budget is 10th. $152 million is our operating budget this year. We rank 10th. There's schools that are just above 100, Vanderbilt being one of those, but they have some money that, I call it funny money, that we don't all know about. And then you've got like a Texas A&M that's at $225 million. And so there's a huge variance just in the operating budgets in the SEC. And so I would say that the NIL marketplace on each of our campuses relative to our operating budgets, right? That I'm assuming that the schools that have the highest operating budgets also have the highest NIL budgets. And it just kind of goes down from there. But with that said, we're 10th in the SEC in our operating budget, and we've won 33 SEC championships in 5 years, more than any other SEC school. So you don't have to throw money at every problem to be successful.
I've been asking you questions as Arkansas's AD. I want you to put your hat on as part of the NCAA Football Division I Oversight Committee. Did I get it right?
You did.
All right. Just, and real quick, just to explain that for people who don't understand, basically you're part of a group of people who are looking out for the best interest of college football.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Michigan, Big Ten, sign stealing. I was talking to Matt Hobbs, who's Arkansas's pitching coach, the other day, and he said that in baseball next year, they're going to PitchCom. pitcher communication. I don't know if you guys have seen this in Major League Baseball. Basically, a pitcher will have a keypad on his knee. He'll cover it up with his glove, put in a couple of numbers, and a pitch is given to the pitcher in his ear. If that technology exists on the college baseball side, and we know it exists for football with the NFL, why are we not seeing that in college football?
I think it has been voted against by many because of the cost to do that. And, we've got 125 Division I football programs. Not everybody can afford that, but we've gotten much better. In this kind of new age of college athletics is to make legislation permissive, meaning if you can afford to do it and you want to do it, you can do it. But there's also a safety element that the helmet manufacturers that currently manufacture many of the helmets won't sign off on that technology being placed in helmets. It exists in NFL helmets. They don't sign off on it for that as well, but that's just a different place. You're talking about college student athletes. You're adjusting the safety of a football helmet to put the recording device in there, or the hearing device in the football helmet. A little bit different from what they do in baseball. But there are some wearable technologies that you may see some baseball teams that now have these wristbands that have this digital technology, and so I think you may see something like that come up in football. But here's what drives me crazy, and faith is a big part of my life, but the fact that we have to constantly legislate basic human integrity in college athletics drives me crazy. And we won't hold each other accountable. I don't know what's going on at Michigan, but the Big Ten and the NCAA shouldn't have to hold their head football coach accountable. The University of Michigan, a high-profile academic institution, if there's something going on with their football program, well, by God, the president and athletic director should hold them accountable.
There were some SEC schools that said they saw Connor Stallions buy tickets at their stadiums. Is that something you even looked into?
We did. He didn't buy any at Arkansas. I'm kind of disappointed at that, quite honestly. But we did. Yeah, we all checked on it. And he has not been at Razorback Stadium.
Okay.
At least not under that name.
Not at War Memorial either?
No, not at War Memorial either.
Segue, War Memorial's future. I guess it's tied into the 8-9 game SEC schedule.
It is, yeah. We've scheduled a game. We have Pine Bluff in 24, and then we have that school in the eastern part of the state over there in 25, and we're going to play that game. And then we'll see what happens after that, depending on if we have an 8 or a 9 game schedule, et cetera.
One more for you. You have not, and I say your university has not put banners in Bud Walton Arena in a while. I think it's been about 7 or 8 years since the last one. Is there any thought to bringing that back? I mean, you got Gary Blair, who just was put into the Naismith Hall of Fame, and I know it's more for what he did at Texas A&M, but obviously there's an Arkansas element to it. There's a great backlog, I think, of basketball players and coaches who could do that. Is that something you think about bringing back?
Well, and conveniently Kevin's left. Kevin is a resident historian, and he's really oversees that program. Quite honestly, we don't want to lose the rich history and tradition and celebrating our history and the people that laid the foundation for where we are today. But there's so many front burner issues within college athletics right now. I don't know that retiring jerseys and hanging banners has risen to the top of what we're dealing with right now. But I know Kevin's on top of that, and we're really looking at our criteria for what the criteria should be to have a banner hung in your honor, or to retire a jersey or retire a number. I like saying retiring a jersey because we already have enough duplicate numbers in football that it's more better to retire the jersey and not the number, unless it's just a really, really special person.
But that is something that you've looked into.
Yeah, Kevin and I have those conversations, yes. Okay. But I leave that in Kevin's wheelhouse, and I'm not blaming him now that he's walked out of the room, but that's his deal.
All right. Well, Hunter, we appreciate you coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.